Hello everyone, so in this video we're going to be talking about how to create a camera app using Python PyGTK, which is the Python binding for the GTK library, and then Py GStreamer using the Python binding for it. And so the content is going to be as follows. One, creating a GTK window. A GTK window is the very basic element in a GTK app. It's the window that contains everything else inside it. And then after creating the window, we're going to add a label to it, which then becomes the equivalent of a GTK Hello World application. And then we're going to add the feed pipeline, same exact pipelines that we were using and trying in the previous episodes. After doing that, so if you just add the pipeline without doing anything, it will just show in a window of its own, similar to what we were doing before using the terminal. So this leads the way for the next point, which is integrating this feed pipeline that we created into our GTK application. And finally, we're going to finish off by creating two buttons and adding them. This will pave the way for the next episode in which we will be implementing the snapshot and record video feature in our camera app. But for now, we'll just add the buttons. So without further ado, let's start. Here is our Python file. So first, we're going to have to import GTK and Gstreamer. So let's do import GI. GI is the repository from which we import the other stuff. And from gi.repository import GTK, and also from gi.repository import GST. But we can't just do that, we have to add the version. I'm pretty sure if... Okay, so that's just an unrelated error. But we need to require the version to tell it which version of GTK we're going to be using. So for GTK, we're going to be using 3.0. And for GStreamer, we're going to be using, this autocomplete is really not the best, GST 1.0, which you could have guessed because we were using GST launch 1.0. So first, we have to create a class for our main window. Let's call it window. And it's going to inherit from GTK window, which is the GTK window class. And we have to create our constructor in it. So, and first thing, we're going to have to call the GTK window constructor, gtk.window.init. And we can also optionally pass the title for our window. Let's say camera app. And then for this to actually do anything, so right now we've only just created the class. We have to instantiate it. So let's create an object, call it window. Let's say my window. Okay, and instantiate it from the window class we just created. And then we have to show it, show all, to show everything inside the window. And now if we run this, you see, as soon as I run it, it terminates. This is because there is no event loop. There is no loop that keeps the app running. So what could we do? We could use an infinite while loop, but that's just gonna keep the execution stuck in it. We won't be able to interact with our app, right? So let's actually try that. While true, let's just do 1 x equals 1 or something. Now let's try running it. So it just gets stuck, but it doesn't work because, yeah, it's not how it's supposed to be. So what you do is you just use the gtk.main, which is the GTK main event loop, and that takes care of everything that has to do with that for you. So just run camera app, and here we go, our window with the title that we gave it, camera app. Okay, now we're gonna want to add a label. So just call it label and gtk.label, and we can say label equals hello world. And we're gonna, so this line, we only just created the label, the object, label object, but we want to add it to our window. So we can say self.add label, like so, and then run our app again, and here you go. We have the label, and it fills up the entire window. But as you saw, when we first ran the app, it only took as much space as it needed for the label, which was very little. Now we want to set a size for our window so that it opens at the right size. We can do that using GT, or you don't have to do that. You can just say self.set size, set default size. Say, make it, for example, 500 by 400. Now we can run our application again, and here you go. Okay, so here you go. Now we added our label. Next in line was to create the pipeline. So actually, we're going to step back a bit. So in GTK, there is something called signals. Signals are basically events that you connect to. So you can have an event. When that event happens, you apply something. So for example, there could be an event for when a button is clicked, a window is created, a window is deleted. So here, we're going to define a function, call it onRealize. Realize is when the window gets realized, gets made basically. And we're going to connect it from here, like so. Self.connect realize self.onRealize. And inside our realize method, we're going to create our pipeline. So pipeline equals gst.parseLaunch, and we're going to create our pipeline. So very simple, before L2 source device equals the video 0, and then we're going to add a video convert. Maybe we wouldn't need that, but let's just add it. And then GTK sync, and then we're going to give our GTK sync a name so that we can access it later on. Let's call it sync. So here we go, our pipeline is created, and now we want to access the sync. So what we'll do is pipeline.get element by name, or was it just get by name? So let me check the documentation. It's just get by name. What? Okay, sync, and let's call this GTK sync. And then after we got the sync element, which is basically this element, we need to get the widget associated with the GTK sync element. If you open the documentation, the GStreamer documentation, you're going to find that each element has certain properties, and those properties you can access. So the GTK sync has one property. If you look in the documentation, it's called widget. This widget is the GTK widget that you can then take and attach to your window. So we're going to do, let's just call it widget. But widget would make it like this one, so we don't want to do that. So just call it widget sync. And so GTK sync dot props to access those properties, and then widget. Now we have our widget. After we do that, we have to add it to our application. So self.add widget sync. Okay. And after that, we need to play the pipeline. So when you were doing it in the terminal, you just ran gst launch 1.0 and it just started everything. But here in our application, sometimes maybe we want to create the pipeline but not start it right away. So GTK in Python, it gives you that option. You can create the pipeline and start it or end it whenever you please. So to start it, you do pipeline dot set state, and then you set the state to gst dot state dot playing. As you saw, there was also a paused state. Now, if you try to run this, let's see what happens. The window gets created, and here's the label that we added, but we don't see anything, and we get an error, no element v4l2 source. This is because we didn't add one very important GST boilerplate, which is gst.init none. This is just boilerplate. If you don't know it, you'll look it up and see why you're getting this error, and eventually you'll find out that you have to use this. So just take it as it is. So here now we see that we have our window and a separate window for the camera, but it's not working because we have this camera here. So let's turn off this camera and close the application. Now let's try rerunning. It works, but it's again in a separate window. So that means we have something wrong with the integration. Let's go back now. So let's see what we have here. I suppose it could be a problem that we have the label added and we're also adding the widget, which we can't do. We're gonna have to use a box for that, as we'll see later. So let's just comment this for now and rerun. And so it doesn't work yet still, because there's also one thing we forgot, which is we have to show this widget sync dot show. This is something very common in GTK. When you have something, a widget that you created and you added, but it still doesn't show, just check. Maybe you have to explicitly call show. And here we go. Our Python GTK app, the window that we created with the feed integrated inside it, as you can see. So now let's terminate, get our camera back. So we're done with the first 4 points. Now just we have to add the 2 buttons. So in order to add 2 buttons and also add the feed widget to the window, we have to use a layout organizer of sorts. So basically a layout widget. In GTK you have something called boxes. Boxes are layout widgets. Inside the box you add different widgets. You have 2 different types of boxes, a vertical box and a horizontal box. So now we need a vertical box. So let's create a vertical box. VBox equals gtk.box, and then orientation equals, we need it to be vertical, gtk.orientation dot vertical, as you can see. And then inside this vertical box, we're gonna add the label dot add so VBox like this dot add label, but we're gonna also add the widget sync. And let's make this a member of our class so we can access it here. Self.vbox.add. Okay. Okay. But there's something we haven't done yet, which is add the vertical box itself to the window. So let's do that. VBox. Now let's try rerunning. Self.vbox. Okay. Again. And here you go. You got the label and then the widget. So let's close this. Instead of this label, actually, we want to add two buttons. So let's just add them here. Button 1 equals GTK button. Let's have it say record. And then button 2 equals same thing, but we just want it to be snapshot. And then after adding the sync, we're going to add the first button and also the second button. Now let's try running. Let's run. And here you go. I see myself, but I don't see the buttons. Again, as we said before, show. So let's do button 1 dot show, button 2 dot show, and now rerun, and we should see them. Here you go. Record, snapshot, and our feed. So as you can probably infer, you can use a horizontal box, and instead of adding those buttons to the main vertical box right away, you can first add the horizontal box. It'll be under the feed sync, and then in the horizontal box add the widgets, record and snapshot if you want them to be next to each other. That was it for today. Hope you learned. If you want to learn more, you can subscribe and wait for future videos. Thank you.